Hi, my name is Morten, and in this video we will be looking at the checkout preview page. So this is the last step of the checkout flow after we have selected payment and shipping options. And now we want our customers to finally review their order before they check out. And by checkout, it means they will either pay with the invoice or they will be redirected to a payment gateway to enter their credit card information. In this particular case, we will just stick with invoicing as we don't have a live payment gateway up and running that we can test on. But the process is the same, the APIs are the same, and as a developer, you don't have to care about how the order is being finalized on the preview page. You just have to initiate the actual checkout, and that's what we're here to look at. Partly to preview the content of the basket by grabbing the basket and showing it on the page for the user, similar to what we have done on the basket page previously in the masterclass. And then it is when the user decides to pay, then call the proper API to initiate that. So that's what we will be looking at, and we will also be looking at how we can make sure that the customer lands on the correct thank you page after the order has been collected. So let's dive right into it. Previously, we have created all the pages that we need for our checkout flow. This goes for the checkout preview page here as well. It's no different than what we have done throughout the different exercises. So we have an MVC controller here that we will be using. In this case, it's called Checkout Preview Controller, and that means in the CMS we have to set up the required content in the CMS to make that call our Checkout Preview Controller. We've done this a bunch of times, so it doesn't need further explanation. Otherwise, jump back and watch the video on how to work in your particular CMS that you're following the masterclass for. In the index method, we have our purchase order view model. We need to populate that and return it to the view. Again, no different than what we have done in the previous exercises. We also have transaction library up here, which is being resolved via Object Factory. Again, not a lot of explanation needed. It just works. So we have transaction library and we have our basket model. Now we need to use the transaction library to grab our purchase order. So let's do that. That's our purchase order. We want to call get basket with the parameter false, which loads up the basket from the database using the cookie on the user's computer that contains a GUID for that particular basket. We have our purchase order here, and entities v2. Just want to emphasize again that all the transactional data is loaded up via Hibernate and not via the search indexes we do for the catalog data. So every time we have an entities v2, it's loaded up via the SQL APIs. It's a nice thing to know as a developer where the data is actually coming from. Good, so now we have the basket and we can continue to build and populate our view model. The first thing that we want to show for the user is the different addresses. So that's the billing address and it's the shipping address as well. And we can use our little helper method down here, which takes in an order address, which is both the billing address and the shipping address attached to the order. To grab those, we will be using the transaction library as well to get those, as there is a little bit of logic associated with getting the right address. Transaction library helps us achieve that. It returns an address view model, and yeah, it's basically just a piece of boilerplate code because it just takes one property and maps it over to the other. So there's nothing fancy going on here at all. So on the basket model, we have our billing address. With get billing information. So we need to call map address for that. And we also have our shipping address. Where we will call get shipping information. So those are the addresses. Those will be showed. So the customer will basically see what they entered in shipping and billing address, so they can review that. And now we also need to map all the order lines and all the different totals of the basket. We took a little closer look to the different totals on the basket page as well. Here we will basically just redo what we have already done, mapping the different totals over to our view model. So we are interested in showing tax. And here we can just grab the different totals of the order. Every time we use the basket pipeline to update the basket content, it means that all the totals are in the correct state, so we don't have to further process it. We have tax total, for example, and to do that we will be using the money object, as we also did on the basket page, to have the content properly formatted. So we want to pass in get value or default, and we want to pass in the currency coming from the basket. And then we want to call to string, and then the money object will automatically format itself based on the culture and the currency used on the basket. And that is of course similar to what we already did on the basket page. So tax total, we also need the order total, the shipping total, the subtotal, and then all the order lines. So the first thing that I'll do here is I'll just do some copy pasting. Of course, that's normally strictly forbidden. So let's just do it this one time and never again. So we want to map the shipping total as well. And we want to map the order total. And the subtotal. So these are all the different amounts that we would like to present for the user on the page. We don't necessarily want to show all of them, but with UCommerce you of course just have the ability in case that for some reason you need it. Sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming for the customers to see all those numbers. So we're not necessarily interested in doing that. They're mostly interested in the order total, and the tax can sometimes be important, mostly in B2B cases, but in B2C cases, they don't necessarily want to see tax for all the individual different products. They just want to see a subtotal, what is the tax they need to pay, and what is the order total. And of course, the shipping costs are fairly important for the users as well, to see what that adds up to. So we have tax total, shipping total, order total, and subtotal now. And now we want to also map the order lines. So let's iterate those on our basket. On the purchase order view model, we have the order lines collection as well, so we just need to add to that. That is an order line view model. On the basket page, it was important that we use the order line ID in order to modify the basket on the individual lines. We don't need that in this case. We actually don't have to map it. Let's just do it anyways. We want the product name, which is part of the order line. Remember that order lines don't have a link back to the product because we cannot change the product on an order after it has been place, then it would over time that would change the history, and we're very much not interested in that. So that's why we have a product name and not a link back to the product. We want to map the quantities as well. How many of each product do they buy? Sometimes we're interested in the SKU as well, mostly for B2C scenarios. An iPhone, do a B2C user really need to know what the SKU of an iPhone is in this system? Probably not, but we have it available in case we need it. The tax, again, not necessarily important for a B2C user. For B2B scenarios, it may make sense, so let's map it as well. So similar to what we had on the basket, the order lines also have tax on them. Order price, VAT, and we can also have the VAT rate if we want to. And again, we're using this money object here to make sure that it formats the correct way. And the total of the order line is also important. And we can have the unit price as well. So let's do another copy paste. And this is the property called price. And I actually think that should be it. The total, we need to wrap that in a money object as well. Your default. And that's actually it. We don't have to do anything else in terms of showing the data on the storefront. Now it's time to also check the customer out. And the way that we do that is by redirecting to the payment request page in UCommerce, which is a processor that takes in an order and then it figures out what to do with it. Mostly it will just call request payments on the payment method used. Here we do return redirect, but in this case we want to eventually land on the complete page, but we need to go through the actual payment page, which is something that the user won't see because he will just be redirected again to the correct page. Either with an invoice, it will just go to the complete page because UCommerce will automatically consider the order as fulfilled, and then the payments will be handled after the fact in a separate system. Or if we go to a payment gateway and back, then when we get back from the payment gateway, we also need to land on the correct page. So that's why we need to configure something on the payment methods. We'll see that in a few minutes how that looks like. For now, to check out the customer, we can do two things. There's a legacy thing that allows us to just call request payments directly, and then we can take care of the redirect ourselves. But the best practice way is to call get payment page URL, which will return us the page that we need to redirect to. So here we take in a payment. And here we then need to use transaction library to grab the order and then grab the first payment on the order. Usually that will only be a single one. Otherwise, we need to qualify it a little what the actual payment we need. So I'll just take the basket and I'll assume that we have a payment. So the UCommerce order supports multiple payments, like if we pay with partly account or user points or gift cards or whatever, those would normally also be considered a payment. In this case, we keep it simple and just assume we have a single payment for our order. Otherwise, you can also check the payments that you get back, what the status of the payment is. So if you're paying with something like gift card, a payment would be considered authorized or acquired immediately, and a payment that still needs to be fulfilled would be new or pending order status or something like that. But here we don't need to qualify it further, as we just have a single one. And the payment would have been created in the previous part of the checkout flow from the payment page we just came from. So we redirect from payment over to the preview page, and as part of that, we create an actual payment that needs to be fulfilled by the customer. That's the payment that we're getting here. So we'll pass that into the get payment page URL, and actually what we have to do here is grab the URL and then redirect to that page using the MVC API here. And that's actually all we have to do here in order to check out the customer. A lot of things happens during checkout, which we will also cover in this video, where we will talk a little bit about what happens when the customer is actually being checked out. We'll go a little more in depth with sending emails and assigning order numbers and stuff like that. But for now, we just have to care about making sure that the customer can actually pay for his order. And that's using the get payment page URL that we then redirect to. So let's try to compile the solution and see if it works. My site has reloaded, and we're on the payment page. So let's try to select the payment option that we want to use and look at the preview page. So here we can see the information that we entered in. We have all the totals fleshed out on the page here, and the place order button will now call the get payment page URL that we coded up in the post method. Once this happens, we will actually experience an error, and that's because we haven't configured our payment option to use the right set of configurations. So we need to fix that before we can get to the actual complete page. So what we can see here is that we get an error on this sub URL here called paymentrequest.xd, which is the payment handler in WooCommerce that will take care of redirecting you to either the complete page or the payment gateway where you enter credit card information. As I said before, we're using account/invoice type payment here, so WooCommerce will automatically just validate that this payment method is okay. So the way we can continue here is by going down to the payment option that we choose and then set the URL that we want to use for the complete page. And as we can see in the description method, we can use either an absolute or a relative path. In our case, we'll just use a relative path to /complete, but it can go wherever we want to be redirected. So under the orders node and payment methods, we have the two payment options that we could choose from on the front end. So let's just edit one of them to go to the complete page, which we haven't done. So the accept URL here is actually the subpath that we want to configure where our users should be placed once the order completes. If we are using a payment gateway, we will have another set of configurations where you can enter cancel URLs if there's an error URL you can go to, and also the complete URL or the return URL, which lets us get to the same page that the user should see once the order has been completed. And the options that you can set is based on the payment method service that you set here. These are all the payment providers that WooCommerce supports out of the box. And if you read the configuration and documentation for each of the payment gateways, it will allow you set it up without any code changes based on what we have done on the website so far. So this supports all types of payment that we have in UCommerce. So let's try to complete it, and then take a step back and do another order. So my previous payment actually went through, but the error was in the redirect. So I have a new basket now, as it was already completed, but the redirect failed because I hadn't set that configuration. So I'm back on the preview page and I'm ready to place my order. So let's do that. Meanwhile, I have also created the complete page, so my CMS actually loads a page on the route that I set, which was the /complete page. There's an associated complete controller in there as well. We'll take a look at in a second. But what we can see here is that it says thank you for your order, and here's your order number, WEB 13, which was the order number that was generated once the order was checked out. If you notice in one of the previous steps, if you take a look at the order number, it's not set until you actually complete the order. The reason for that is that we don't want to create order numbers for each basket, as some would like that the order numbers are sequential, which means that it should not jump from 13 to 24, because in the meantime there has been a lot of other people coming in on the web shop and claimed those other order numbers, but they would not be completed. You can change that if you're not happy with how it works, but out of the box you will only get an order number once the order has actually been placed. Let's dive back into the complete controller in the back office and see what we do. Before we do it, notice that in the query string we now have order GUID equals a GUID, and that's not something that I have configured. This is UCommerce automatically appending the order GUID to the URL that I wanted my customer to be placed on after it checked out. The reason for this is that the basket no longer exists for this user. It has been converted into to an actual order instead of a basket by changing the status of the basket or the order to new order instead of to basket state, as well as we have cleared the cookie on the user's computer. So once he adds stuff to his basket, he will now get a new one, which is very convenient because we don't want to change the content of the basket after it has been paid for. So the way that we can now extract the order is by looking at this order GUID. Let's go to the controller to see. So this is also pre-implemented. It's just a very basic call to transaction library. The first thing I do is that I pass the GUID from the query string, and then transaction library has a method called getPurchaseOrder that takes in a GUID, and it will look for the order GUID set for that purchase order. So I now have the basket, and then on my basket model, similar to the preview and the basket page, we have an order number property where I just set this, and in my view I just say thank you for your order, and here's your order number. So we haven't done anything special in here, but this is just to highlight the fact that if you did call transaction library get basket, you would end up with a new basket that was empty, and you would not be able to show to the customer what they actually purchased if you want to show the content one more time. In this case, I just showed you the order number, and that's it. When we send out emails, let's try to take a look at the email controller. Okay, so here I have my order email controller, and the cool thing about emails in UCommerce is that they are sent out just like any other page is rendered in the CMS. So what UCommerce will do is it will take the content of a page that you define and put it in as an HTML content of that email, and then send that out to the customer. It means that you can wire up your emails just like any other page in your CMS. So there's no complex subsystems or template languages that you need to adhere to in order to send out an email. It's just another page in the CMS that WooCommerce will take the content of and then output as content in the mail. So that means we also have to point WooCommerce to a particular page in the CMS, which we will show you in the next video how to do that. Fairly easy stuff. It requires a little bit of configuration, but not a lot. So we will cover that in the following video. From a code perspective, as I said, it's just a regular page, meaning we have a controller, we have a view, we define a page in the CMS, and that's all. So it's the exact same exercise as we've been doing all the way up until now. Apart from that, we need to do the same thing as we did on the complete page, which is to grab the order GUID from the query string and then load the order based on that. It's the basket has still at this point been converted into to an actual order, which means that transaction library get basket would give us a new basket instead of the one we're interested in. And that happens because after the payment has been added, then WooCommerce will convert the basket into an order using the checkout pipeline, which is another pipeline in WooCommerce that are relevant for checkout. One of the steps here is to convert the basket, i.e. it's just changing order status from basket to new order, clearing the cookies on the user's computer, assigning an order number, and as the last step, sending out the confirmation email that has been configured in the platform. So that's what the checkout pipeline does, and that has already run when we land on the complete page and when the order email is being sent out. We just need to be aware of that, and that's why we do the order GUID from the query string and load the order based on that down here, and then we map the data that we're interested in and show that in our view. And that's actually all we have to do in order to send out the email. And that's it for this video. Here we covered the preview page, we covered checkout, and we also covered how we wire up the email from a controller perspective. In the next video, we will show you how to configure the actual email content. So that's it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you in the next one.